I feel like celebrities have a lot of patience. Between screaming fans and social media drama, they must have a lot of practice with staying cool, calm, and collected in every aspect of life. The one thing that I think tests them the most, however, are interviews, because sometimes the interviewer can be rude or even ask some dumb questions. There's been a few celebrities that have cracked a bit and clapped back, so today let's talk about that as we count down the top 10 celebrities who fired back at the interviewer. At number 10, Oprah. Oprah seems like a pretty chill person, so to hear that she sort of lost her cool is certainly surprising. One of the few instances that I've seen her get upset comes from an interview where Oprah was being grilled for her weight. In a 1985 interview with Joan Rivers, Oprah was getting fat shamed left, right, and center, and it was pretty painful to watch. You can see how angry Oprah was getting at this point, and there's so much more to this interview which shows the countless times Oprah was being shamed and disrespected in front of a live audience no less. At times throughout this interview, Oprah would try to explain something or deflect Joan's criticisms, but it didn't really work, and Joan just kept firing some hurtful words at her. Years later, Oprah went on to say how even 30 years later, this interview still hurt. In an interview with The Talk, Oprah said, quote, "I was 30 years old and it was the biggest moment of my life. I'd made it to The Tonight Show, but essentially Joan called me fat. I was called out as being the fat girl on national TV as a surprise, and I felt immense shame about it. I could cry right now thinking about that moment," end quote. Oprah tried clapping back with every insult, but it just kept making it worse, making for an overall very uncomfortable situation. At number 9, Robert Downey Jr. During the press tour for Avengers Age of Ultron, actor Robert Downey Jr. sat down with Channel 4 reporter Krishnan Guru Murthy for an interview that soon took a turn. In the interview, Krishnan asked Downey what seemed to have been an offensive question when he said, quote, "The reason I'm asking you about your past is you've talked in other interviews about your relationship with your father and the role in all of that, all of the dark periods you went through, taking drugs and drinking and all that. I just wondered whether you think you were free of that or whether that's something ... and that's as far as he got. RDJ cut him off mid-sentence and asked, quote, "What are we doing? Are we promoting a movie?" Then he looked off camera at, I'm guessing, his manager or publicist, who gave him the okay. Then he got up and stormed out of the interview. As you're probably aware, Robert has had a tumultuous past and it's honestly within his rights to avoid being asked about it. So obviously this interviewer had struck a serious nerve. He later went on to call the interview a bottom-feeding muckraker, so he certainly got his clap back. Now before we carry on with the rest of the list, I would like to take a moment to ask you guys to consider leaving a like on this video if you're enjoying it so far, because it really does help support the channel. At number 8, Paris Hilton. For years, no one really took Paris Hilton seriously. We all saw her as a spoiled, rich socialite, but there was so much more to her that we didn't know yet. I think out of most celebrities out there, Paris Hilton is one of the most misunderstood. For a long time, whenever she was in the news for something negative, people would think that she deserved it because she needed to be humbled or something, but after her YouTube documentary came out about her real life, people's opinions changed and now we see her in a different light. In 2011, Paris did an interview where she tried to talk about her reality show and things just did not go well. All the interviewer wanted to talk about was her place in Hollywood and in the media, and when she tried to steer the conversation towards the show, the interviewer just sort of laughed and brushed it off as her being a diva. If you really watch the whole interview, these guys are really just jerks, so I can't blame Paris for getting mad and annoyed. Years later, she came out to talk about how angry that interview made her and how disgusted she was with the host, and again, I can't blame her. She got to call them out for the way they treated her, and she got her justice. At number 7, Scarlett Johansson. Scarlett Johansson is probably best known these days for playing the character of Natasha Romanoff or Black Widow in the MCU, and if you're familiar with her character's costume, then you know it's a skin-tight bodysuit type of situation. Well, apparently this costume somehow blows the minds of many, and a lot of people want to know if she's wearing any undergarments with her supersuit. Why? Who knows? Well, since Scarlett has had so many people ask her this question in the past, she started getting pretty fed up with it, so when it came to another interview when someone asked her about her underwear situation, she actually got pretty upset and had to clap back. I feel like this is one of those issues that women in Hollywood are all too familiar with, because for some reason, all people want to know is what they're wearing and stuff like that, which is pretty dumb, so good on Scarlett for clapping back. At number 6, Samuel L. Jackson. Actor Samuel L. Jackson is certainly not someone who takes BS from anyone. I just feel like he won't hesitate to clap back when he feels like something is up. An example of a moment where he fired back at an interviewer comes from a TV interview the actor did back in 2014, where a TV news anchor mistook Samuel L. Jackson for Lawrence Fishburne, and his reaction was both intense and a little funny. The news anchor started off their interview by asking the actor about his Super Bowl commercial, but soon he was corrected into realizing that the commercial was from Lawrence Fishburne and not Samuel.
I'm not Lawrence Fishburne. That's my fault. I know that. That was my fault. My mistake. You know what?
We don't all look alike.
Father, you're exactly
We may be all black and famous.
You
but
are
we all don't look
guilty.
alike.
In response to this apparently very common mix-up, Samuel told the news anchor that he is in fact not Lawrence Fishburne, and then goes on to say that though he and Fishburne are very successful black men, that they are not in fact the same person. I'm pretty sure he was joking a little bit at this moment, but there also seemed to be a little bit of frustration mixed in there too. You could sort of tell how the interviewer looked embarrassed in that moment, but I guarantee you that they never made that mistake again. Halfway through at number 5, Joan Rivers. Joan Rivers was a funny, sassy, and all-around fun woman. She said herself that she was put on this earth to make people laugh, but that doesn't necessarily mean that she couldn't lose her cool either. Joan was a relatively patient person when it came to the press, because she knew to take everything they say with a grain of salt, but there came a moment where she was so upset by an interview that she just stormed out. This happened when she was being interviewed by CNN about one of her books. During the interview, the reporter started off by asking about Joan's book and her life, but then the questions turned and became a little more negative and judgmental. The reporter started commenting on Joan's comedy style and suggesting that some of her jokes could be a little shocking and rude, and then she went on to comment on the fact that Joan was wearing fur on the cover of the book. This, on top of all the other criticisms that she was receiving in the interview, got Joan mad, and she kind of went off on the reporter.
I work for animal rights. Stop it with, and you do this, and you're mean, and you're that. You are not the one to interview a person who does humor. Sorry. Are we serious?
You could really tell that Joan was fed up with this interview, and so she just stormed out. At number 4, Gary Coleman. The late Gary Coleman had a pretty successful career, but he also faced some scrutiny around his suspected domestic altercations with his wife. Before his passing, he was asked about his alleged quarrels with his partner during a number of interviews, and though he denied ever having laid a hand on his partner, that never stopped people from prying. Being suspected of hurting others made him very upset over time, as he was always being grilled on this, and we definitely saw his breaking point during an interview on The Insider. During the interview, Coleman was being grilled about his place in the media and the allegations that he had been facing, and as he continuously turned down these allegations and scrutiny, the interviewer just kept pushing until Gary snapped and began yelling at them, calling them names, and saying some other disrespectful things. After being interrogated and getting increasingly angrier, he stormed out of the interview. Though they tried calling him back, he was just too upset to return. At number 3, Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift is known for being pretty chill and laid back, and you never really see her get upset much, but one interview back in 2015 really set her over the edge, and she had to clap back at the interviewer for it. This happened when Taylor was stopped for a quick interview while she was walking the red carpet at the Grammys in 2015. The interviewer asked the camera to get a shot of Taylor's legs in the dress, and then goes on to make a comment saying, quote, "I just wanted to show the legs because as I was telling you ahead of time, I think you're going to walk home with more than just a trophy tonight. I think lots of men." End quote. A completely inappropriate and disgusting comment on the interviewer's part there. Clearly angered by the interviewer's comment, Taylor replies with, quote, "I'm not going to walk home with any men tonight. I'm going to hang out with my friends, and then I go home to the cats. Men get me in trouble." End quote. That's some seriously messed up energy in that whole interview. Don't assume what people are going to do with their personal time, and don't assume that people are dressing a certain way for anyone else but themselves. At number 2, Tom Hardy. Actor Tom Hardy seems like a relatively decent guy, staying out of trouble in the media and such, but he's also not afraid to call someone out, especially in an interview. In one instance where an interviewer clearly made Tom a little angry, he was being asked about his sexuality during a press conference at the Toronto International Film Festival. The journalist asked Tom if he thought that other celebrities have a hard time embracing their sexuality in the media. Why this was a question, I'm not sure, and Tom really didn't know either. You could tell that he was a little taken aback and frustrated with this question, as it didn't have anything to do with why they were having that press conference, and so he asked to clarify the question. When he asked the reporter if they were asking about his own sexuality and they replied, "Sure," he answered back with, "Why?" Gave up, and then moved on to someone else's question. Just that simple "why" was enough to really show that he was frustrated with that reporter. It was a subtle clapback, but it still got the point across. And finally, at number 1, Ariana Grande. Ariana has done a lot of really cool interviews in the past, but there's one in particular that will stick with a lot of people because of Ariana's legendary clapback to some sexist comments made by the interviewers. During the radio interview, Ariana was asked if she either had to use makeup or her phone one last time, which one would she choose? As if this was such a life-altering decision for her to make. Instead of answering the question, the singer clapped back asking, quote, "Is this really what you think girls have trouble choosing between?" To which one of the radio hosts replied, "Yes." Then they follow into a debate over if Ariana can actually live without these things, and they got into a bit of an argument. I think what really made her mad here was the sexism embedded in the question, the fact that these guys assume that all girls are obsessed with their phones and makeup, which is just all kinds of incorrect, but I digress. I just love how Ariana threw it back in their faces and they looked stunned, so good on ya, Ari. Now before I wrap things up, I want you guys to leave me a comment telling me about the last time someone really tested your patience. Was it your sibling, your partner, a coworker, or even your kids? Tell me about when you lost your cool down in the comments. Anyways, that's it for me. I've been your host, Bree Room, and until next time, stay safe, make good choices, and stay groovy, friends. Bye!